Cast your mind back a few years, and some of you may remember the term VACU was doing the rounds. VACU, VACU, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Essentially, it was a trendy management term for the fact that the world we live in is all a bit nuts and nebulous. Even though time has passed since that term became popular, what it represents hasn't changed. We live in a world where change is just the way things work. The pace of technology change has never been as fast. The skills we need are changing, and there's a whole lot of crazy stuff going on around the world that's impacting our professional lives as communicators. So, as we look from now to the next few years, what are the skills communicators need to develop, and what are the unique challenges and opportunities we need to be aware of? It's a question that I discussed with great enthusiasm with today's podcast guest, Ross Monaghan, a strategic communications lecturer at Deakin University in Melbourne and the chair of the IABC Asia Pacific region. Ross began writing for his local newspaper while still in high school, and after a brief stint as a journalist, he completed his first degree and started working for BHP upon graduation. He also served as Optus's community relations manager, where he helped establish the Mobile Carriers Forum to address community concerns about mobile phone deployment. Ross was later appointed Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Mobile Telecommunications Association, representing Australia's mobile phone industry during the introduction of internet-enabled mobile phones. As an academic, Ross has won a National Teaching Award and has chaired or spoken at more than 50 conferences throughout the Asia Pacific region. He has addressed classes around the globe and delivered in-person presentations at institutions ranging from Hanoi University of Economics to Harvard University in Boston, USA. In this episode, we covered everything from what critical skills we need to be developing, what's not changing with our profession, and the key trends Ross is seeing in his role at the university and as a leader in the Asia Pacific comms scene. So without further ado, here's Ross. Well, hello, Ross. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Mel.
Thank you so much for taking the time out from your very busy schedule to chat to us on Less Chatter, More Matter. So before we get into the guts of today's episode, can you tell us a little bit about you? What do you do? How did you come to develop your expertise in this space?
Yeah, well, so I'm currently a lecturer at Deakin University. I've only been doing that about 20 years, so I'm kind of a new. Before that, I was the CEO of the Mobile Phone Industry Association in Australia. Look, I got to see a lot of new technology there. I was mentoring other people within my network. And look, I'd always had this inkling that I wanted to teach, so I made the break. And before that, I was at Optus. I was a national community relations manager dealing with a whole range of fun issues, including mobile phone health issues and mobile phone tower deployment. And I'm sure many of your viewers will remember the angst Australia and the world went through about 25 years ago when lots of mobile phone towers were going up. And before that, I was at BHP for about 9 years around Australia, around the world. And before that, I was a journalist. So I started off in media and comms when I was at high school. And weirdly, my very first interview was when I was at high school I think it was year 11, and I wanted to be a journalist. And so I thought, who should I interview? I know, John Howard. He seems like the person. So I called Canberra, and he was coming to Warrnambool, which is where I lived. And so I scooped the local newspaper, got an interview with John Howard, who was very generous with his time.
The former Prime Minister himself. Well done. So how did you go from, and your story is indicative of a lot of ex-journos, right? You start off in media, end up in the corporate world. How did you make that transition?
Well, look, interestingly, when I left high school and became a journalist, I was already aware of public relations, or what I would now call professional communication, because, and I didn't explain, but one of the reasons I wanted to be a journalist was because I was on the junior council in Warrnambool, and the mayor at the time, Tony McCormack, was setting up the PR degree at Deakin University. Look, as it turned out, I made eye contact in my very first meeting with Tony, just as she was saying, who was going to be our PR person. And sort of that's where it all kind of happened. And I got an understanding of the media and how it was important for organizations or groups like the Junior Council to get their message out there. But at the time, I was also interested in graphic design. I was always, a bit of a geek with a camera and a video recorder. Look, all of those skills came together in what is now my role as a professional communication educator, where we have to understand multimedia. Desktop publishing came in when I was at BHP, and I demonstrated and got involved in that within BHP, and that was highly regarded within the company. So they gave me some great professional development experiences, including sending me to North America to do pretty much whatever I wanted for 3 or 4 months, which is just blows people's minds, and it kind of blows my mind thinking back to it. But incidentally, that's a quick way that I learnt that networking is so important. Professional development and professional associations are also really, really important. But also, I think to be on the cusp of new technology and learn it and experiment with it, because if you're that kind of person, then you are highly regarded because you can do what you need to do better. You can do it more efficiently, and what organization doesn't want that?
And certainly I felt that myself in one of my first grown-up jobs, I suppose I'd call it. Got sent off to do a graphic design course, using Adobe InDesign, because I was the comms person, the marketing person, the graphic designer, the all things. But certainly having that extra skill, at that time, that was a skill that people wanted, in addition to being able to write. And that really helped me get other jobs, to be able to do some freelance stuff on the side, because you could do a bunch of different things. And even now I find I've just been working on a massive design project in Canva now instead. So it's like those skills just keep coming back at some point. But that actually brings us to my next question. So let's talk about the comms profession. What are some of the biggest shifts that you've had in yourself over your years of experience?
I mean, when I started in the newsroom, I was using a manual typewriter with carbon paper and copy paper. When we marked up photographs, we used Chinograph pencils, and probably about 80% of your viewers now are going, "What is he talking about? What are these things?"
What is this technology? Yes.
Yeah. So I saw those sort of changes throughout my career, but I've always been interested in that technology. So we started using electronic communication in the newsroom, and I got to play with one of the first laptops that we have, although I use the term laptop very, very loosely. And I could see the changes that were coming, that as we've already kind of discussed, that professional communicators were not just going to be word people. To communicate, we needed an understanding of graphic design. We needed an understanding of how photography, how we could communicate across different platforms or different tactics. So those things have been continually changing. The bottom line of what we do, the transfer of meaning and helping organizations achieve their goals and objectives hasn't changed, but the tactics and the tools have changed. And of course, organizations have changed. But of course, society has changed significantly as well. I mean, there are more options for where you can get your media. There are more ways that you can communicate and connect with people, whether it's down the street or around the world. So these changes in society have had a big impact for us. Changes in technology have had a big impact. But, I like to tell my students that the bottom line of what we do, that transfer of meaning and helping organizations as professional communicators, helping them achieve their goals and objectives hasn't changed.
Yeah, that's very true. And, some of the changes that I think about, just, social media for me was the big shift. That was really what changed a lot of what we did every day. It went from, your standard media release and, and maybe an internet article if you're lucky enough to have an internet, probably an email. That was about it. And then all of a sudden we had citizen journalists. We had multiple platforms that we were engaging with, and we were engaging very differently with people too. It was much more two-way than that kind of broadcast way of communicating, would you say?
Yeah, look, and even before that, I think there were platforms that allowed us a bit of a taste of social media. I remember one of my IABC colleagues in New South Wales, Merrill David, who was highly influential in my career. She and I established an online meeting for IABC probably back in the mid 90s
Wow.
using, I think it was MSN
Ah,
Messenger or
yes,
Yahoo
yes.
Messenger, or maybe even ICQ.
Oh, I remember that. I still remember that noise from the ICQ messenger
Yeah.
popping off. Yeah.
Now, we got a bit of a taste for it back then, and of course, being in the mobile phone industry and
Mm.
talking about the introduction of the mobile internet sort of gave me a lot of insight into the changes, and I was privy to a lot of behind the scenes type things.
It's really cool. It's funny. So I don't reflect enough, I think, on where we've come from and how much things have changed, but also how things have changed so quickly too. And that
Yeah.
pace just keeps continuing, which brings me to my next question. So your role as IABC chair for the APAC region, Asia Pacific, which for those listeners who don't know, you get an insight into what's happening around our region. What are some of the current trends or challenges that you're seeing in the region that we as communicators need to respond to?
Yeah, look, of course, the cost of living and the pressure that's being put on organizations, both commercial and government. I mean, of course, that's having an impact. I know that unfortunately, there are quite a few people who have had to leave their organizations because of that. That's
Mm.
certainly an issue, I think. Um, but also, we can't ignore generative AI as well. And wherever you go, whenever you talk to a new communicator, I mean, that topic always comes up. It's a big issue, of course, in education
Mm.
for me, working with students and getting them to understand how they can use AI to further their studies and further their knowledge rather than just circumventing the assessment process. But, I think organizations are under a lot of pressure because of those financial issues from their shareholders, and governments are wanting to save money. So there's a lot of pressure on us as communication professionals to use products and services that are going to save us money, and AI is certainly one of those. Um, yeah, and it's evolving pretty quickly, but on the other hand, we've already talked about social media. As an issues manager, it's funny because I see a lot of the issues with AI as being almost like deja vu, because some of the issues
Mm.
that we came across with the introduction of social media are being replicated with AI as well. Because whilst a lot of communicators are worried about AI taking their jobs, what most thoughtful people are saying now, it's not AI that's going to take jobs. It's going to be people who know how to use AI
Mhm.
that take the jobs. So again, look, organizations are changing, and I think professionally, as in individuals, we need to do that as well. So I'd urge anyone who's listening to start devoting a little bit of time to using the new technology and learning how you can use it to do your work better.
Mm. I think that's a great point because I was actually just having this discussion earlier with somebody today. And to me, yeah, AI is, again, it's a tool that's new, like social media was, like text messages were, like whatever, the internet was new once too. And we're often fearful of things we just don't understand. And with AI, look, that is taking technology to another level. It will never be this dumb again. It's only getting faster. But by the same token, for me, I found ways to use it to enhance what I do, to make things easier, to do things faster. But it doesn't take away from empathy. It doesn't take away from human connection. It can never replace those things. And strategic thinking, can't replace that at all. And I remember you saying, it was last year's IABC Fusion Conference in Bali, that communicators are actually best placed to lead the adoption of AI in organizations. Can you talk a bit more about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do, you're absolutely right. I think the heart and soul of communication is still with us as individuals. And look, I had this discussion. I'm in a trial in at Deakin University looking at Copilot, and I've been appalled by the way that it wants to rewrite my emails and it changes the meaning, and mostly it gets the grammar correct, but I'm not sure it's doing a great job.
You can tell it's been written by a bot, right? Like it
Yeah,
has a tone to it.
and as you know, so as an academic, when a student stands in an assignment that's been written by AI, they're kind of surprised when I write back and say this has been written by AI, and they say, "How do you know?" Well, I just, one of the things that makes me smile is some students complain about that and they use AI to write their complaining emails. That they didn't write it in AI. So, I stamped that out pretty quickly by just saying I'm not impressed by this long email that's been written by AI. But look, I think communicators are well placed because when organizations are looking at AI issues, we're looking at of course, we're looking at the productivity and efficiency issues. That's, of course, a big issue for lots of organizations. But also there are things like privacy, regulatory issues, legal issues, reputation issues. And this is one I don't think has really, really started to play out yet. It has in a minor way. But all of these other issues like, employee communication, who's best to look and manage all of these issues? I think comms people are the people to do that because, in my lectures, I would say we're boundary spanners, both within the organization and with the regulators, with our investors, with the communities, with employees, with, a whole range. So who best to start the conversations within organizations? Now, it's not up to us to lead all of these different areas, of course. We need to understand the impacts of generative AI and how our organization's reputation could be impacted. So getting internal stakeholders together to discuss the issues, discuss the way forward, and find the appropriate legal, ethical, regulatory, privacy ways forward, as well as discussing those issues with our external stakeholders. It just, to me, it's obvious that professional communicators are the ones that should be leading the way.
I think that's, and I'm right on that same path with you. I think reputation management is the thing that wraps around all of it. It wraps around the IT implementation, the cybersecurity, the organizational risk, like all those things, the people, the change, all that sort of stuff. And I think organizations also need to understand that reputation starts from within. So if you have a great internal experience, that will show externally. And again, comms goes across all of those internal, external audiences too. So I really love that. We've spoken a bit about a couple of the issues in the region or trends as well. So, obviously we've got this cost of living pressures. There's also, conflict in a lot of places in this region. We're also seeing the impacts of climate change, technology adoption. With that comes, of course, there's high rates of scams and all those sorts of things as well. How well equipped do you think we are as communicators, professional communicators, to respond to those changes? What do we need to do differently, perhaps?
Really good question. And to me, that question talks to the value and the role of professional communicators within organizations and societies. And we don't often start these conversations or acknowledge the important role that we play within our organizations and society, because you're right. So much of it involves communication. It involves organizations or government communication. So we need to be there. And I think communicators need to be much more confident and forceful in organizations to let leaders know, let the community know that the work that we do is thoughtful. It's there to listen to key stakeholders, to negotiate, to find appropriate ways forward. So, look, I think we're really, really well placed. So I think for communicators listening to this, understand that you do a really important role. I think it's easy to understand that if you're working for somebody, in emergency management or fire and rescue or cancer council, saving and encouraging people to, not do things that are going to give them cancer. But the role that we play within other or commercial organizations and government organizations as well, to make them efficient, to make them sustainable, to help them address the environmental issues, things like ESG or CSR issues, corporate social responsibility. A lot of those issues were driven by communicators back, when all of this started. So, get out there, listen to key stakeholders, network, talk with other people, share experiences with other communicators throughout the region to learn the latest trends, learn how others are dealing with issues really well, learn how others have made mistakes. And if we do those sort of things, we will advance both the profession and our organizations and society more broadly.
So this brings me to my final question. Well, final, I say now. I might get an idea and ask again. But in your work as a teacher, as an academic, you engage predominantly with young people who are new to, or people who are new to the profession. What do you think are the most critical skills they need to learn and why?
Yeah, look, a great question. And skills are important. But I'm going to go above beyond that question and say that the most important thing is attitude. Because is what we do a profession or is it a lifestyle?
Right now, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, look, because it is. I mean, we're not a 9 to 5 type of profession.
No.
But look, it is more a lifestyle than a profession because understanding the zeitgeist and understanding, what governments, what people are thinking, understand sentiment is really, really important. That's certainly part of the job. So you can't just do that 9 to 5. It's about what you do outside of the workplace. And there are times when our jobs are really intense. So you can't do that sort of work if you just want a 9 to 5 job. And while some are dismayed, others just brighten up and just go out there and do amazing things, which is great because employers nowadays are saying for graduates that they employ for attitude and for skill, which is really important. Yeah, so understanding that some of the skills that we teach at university, like writing, which is really still important, and understanding how to do that, many of the other skills are going to be the responsibility of those students or those unemployed professional communicators, which I jokingly describe them as sometimes, just to get them into the mindset that they are communicators and not just working for somebody at the moment. Developing their skills is really important, but also knowledge is important as well. So skills, absolutely. Knowledge is really important, trying to get them to have a better understanding of the world, of public opinion, what trust issues, policy, public, regulatory issues, and to get some experience. So they're the four things: skills, knowledge, experience. But you've got to have the right attitude.
Yeah, I love that. And I think this is related to that as well. For me, it's about seeing a love of learning. Yeah, I don't want people who are going to just sit on their laurels and keep doing the same thing they've always done because that's what they've always done and it's comfortable for them. I want people who are excited by learning, who are curious by nature. Because as you say, everything's changing so quickly, but also, at the core of a lot of what we do is telling stories. And you can't do that well if you're not curious, if you're not asking the right questions and digging deeper into things as well. And that, again, comes into that attitude piece. If there's an opportunity and it's an opportunity to learn and it's going to take you outside of your comfort zone, it's going to take you outside of the 9 to 5, grab it.
Yeah.
Just go for it because you won't get that again. So, just jump in, see what you can do.
Yep. And embrace the change. I mean, look,
Absolutely.
I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a professional communicator. It's more challenging than ever, but I think that brings with it so many opportunities.
Thanks so much for sharing all of that with us, Ross. I'm going to ask you 3 questions I ask every guest on the podcast. Are you ready for those?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Excellent. Okay. Question number 1. What's one of the best communication lessons you've ever learned, and how did it change the way you approach communication?
Oh, look, it was a phrase, I think, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. I think a lot of people think comms people are out there to, distribute messages, but a really, really important part of our job is to listen and to consult. I've got so many experiences where that's just been so important. Probably one of the biggest ones is when I was tasked to deal with the mobile phone industry within Australia. We had the power to go out and put mobile phone towers wherever we wanted. I convinced the industry we should consult with the community and let them be partners in choosing the most appropriate. There was some skepticism, but we got a big accounting firm to come in and crunch the numbers on the hard numbers, not the, reputational issues. How much do, the legals, all of that. We discovered that it was about half the cost. If we listened and consulted, it saved us about half the cost of putting up a mobile phone tower.
Wow.
Which $500,000 for a mobile phone tower back in the day, and there are about 800 going up a year. That's a lot of savings from information.
That's huge and a great lesson for anybody to learn, really. Thank you. The next question. What's one thing you wish people would do more of or less of when communicating?
Well, probably related to the listening. I mean, look, I think, listen to people, but go beyond the listening. I mean, because look, I'll probably go back to that mobile phone example as well. One thing that I learned is that if you don't actually genuinely listen to people, you're going to miss the point, and you're going to have this, you're never going to meet in the middle. And even when people are saying things, you have to sometimes listen to why they're saying that and the issues. For mobile phone towers, many people were saying that, my biggest concern is, the health issues. But when you start to dig deeper into those issues, they were also concerned about, the property value issues and the aesthetics. So really listen and dig deep to truly understand who we're communicating with. Being a target public focused communicator is what I tell my students that they should be. Because if you really understand the people that you're communicating with, you're going to have a much better chance of, getting through to them.
Louder for the people at the back. Love that. Final question. Who do you turn to for communication advice?
Oh, that's a good question. My network. Look, I think being a networked leader is really, really important. Having a pool of people that you can call on in different situations, that can guide you, that can advise you, and importantly, be a shoulder to cry on. Absolutely.
And that's one of the things I've absolutely loved about being part of IABC is not only has it expanded my network within Brisbane, but within Australia, within Asia, around the world. Like, people in Canada that I would not have met otherwise, professionals all over the UK, all over the US, throughout Asia. And, like that to me is where there's so much joy in being part of that network too.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to walk the talk. I mean, get out there. And if we truly want to understand, how our organizations fit within the world and what we need to do to make them great organizations, because to me, that's what professional communication is.
Awesome. Well, Ross, if people want to connect with you or find out more about you, how can they do that?
Well, probably LinkedIn is the best way to go. So you can just go to rossmonahan.live/LinkedIn, or I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. My social media handle is The Media Pod, TheMediaPod.
Ross, thanks again so much for your time. Really enjoyed our chat.
It's been fantastic. Thanks, Mel.